Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to IPDay's Webinar Wednesdays. Our topic for today is leading the way in Florida's IET programs. Facilitating today's webinar is yours truly. My name is Ron Cruz. I'm the coordinator of the Caribe Refugee Program here in Hillsborough County Public Schools. I'm also a statewide trainer for Florida IPDAY and a national trainer for GED testing service. I just want to go over some few housekeeping tools before we begin. If you have any questions, feel free to type it into the Q&A tab of your toolbar. Your microphones will be muted at all times throughout this webinar. Today's presentation is being recorded and will be available to access through the IPDAY website within 48 hours. With that said, we're going to go ahead and begin with the agenda for today's webinar. We're going to talk about IET and a project that we've conducted with multiple schools and colleges called the IET Intensive Technical Assistance Project. So we're going to give you an overview of what this project was, and then we'll go into talking about what really is this IET. After we get a full grasp of what IET is, we're going to talk about the components and different models for implementation. And we're going to walk you through the steps for developing your own IET program of study, starting with the aligning of the components of your IET program, indicating activities and resources and assessments that would complement those competencies, and drafting your single set of learning outcomes for your IET program. Towards the end of this webinar, we're going to talk about some feedback from participants of this project and also entertain some questions that you may have about this topic. We're also going to conduct a short evaluation at the end of the workshop, so please stick around to complete that evaluation. The Intensive Technical Assistance Project was conducted by Florida IPDAY and has received an approval from the Department of Education. This is stemming from the need of multiple school districts and colleges for help in developing their own IET program, which is a requirement for this year's request for proposal from the Department of Education for the Consolidated AGE grant. The following schools have participated in this Intensive Technical Assistance Project: Collier County Public Schools, headed by Mr. Ariel Pechokas; Hillsborough County Public Schools, headed by yours truly; Indian River State College, headed by Ms. Kelly Amatucci; Osceola County Public Schools, headed by Mr. Jeff Arnott; Palm Beach County Schools, headed by Mr. Fred Barch and Dr. John Hay; Miami-Dade College, headed by Mr. Luis Rodriguez; and Seminole State College, headed by Jane Hudson. So the goal of the project is to complete an IET program of study that will be ready for implementation by the fall of this upcoming academic year, that are designed by experts within that district or college. And then the outcomes of that project will serve as models for the rest of the state to use in developing their own IET programs of study. Just to give you an idea of how long that project took and what activities were involved in that is this slide. We started the project back in March 2021, gathering all of the members and the participating teams from each school district and college. And we went through 5 different stages in the formation of their programs of study. We started with the forming stage, where we really embarked on the brainstorming and really hammering down on what type of IET program and the area of focus that the school district or the college wants to start. Then we went into a storming stage between the months of March and April, where we started realigning work, adjusting team membership, reallocating some resources, and started the alignment process between the basic skills and the career technical competencies of the area of focus they wanted to go in. The next stage was the norming stage, where we started revising the alignments and then went ahead and added in the resources and activities and assessments that are going to complement those competencies on basic skills, workforce preparation, and workforce training. The next stage after that was the performing stage, where we went through several stages of feedback loop, meetings, really hammering down on, are we making the correct alignment? Are we putting appropriate activities and resources and assessments? Are they fully aligned? Once that has been completed, we started forming the single set of learning objectives for those IET programs. And then we started talking about the RFP and see how that program of study will fit into that RFP. The last stage, but not the least, is we did some polishing, submission, and also really developing this particular type of presentation for all of you to see. Overall, we had 3 group meetings, individualized with each school district and college. And at each meeting, we are able to discuss individual concerns within the college or the school district. And we also have the opportunity to meet as a whole to have some form of feedback across members of the participating school districts and colleges. So before I keep on proceeding with the overview of IET, just a little bit of a disclaimer for everyone that we are speaking in terms of the project and the activities of the technical assistance project when we talk about IET. Components, sections, or parts of this presentation may or may not completely align with the state's request for proposal for the Consolidated Adult General Education Grant. So I just wanted to let you know that, and we are not going to be able to respond to questions pertaining to that RFP as well. So let's go ahead and begin. Let's talk about integrated education and training. I'm sure you've heard this definition multiple times. What I'm going to do is just going to emphasize the 3 major components that has to be present within for a program to be considered an integrated education and training program. It has to have 3 components. It has to have the literacy activities, which is pretty much your adult education instructional programs. It has to have a workforce training component, which can exist in multiple forms, including but not limited to credit programs that are considered career technical programs. It could be entrepreneurship programs, and so on and so forth. The third component is the workforce preparation activity, which are competencies that will help prepare the students for entry into the workforce. And those workforce preparation activities are categorized in each of our curricular frameworks in adult education. Now, there are certain conditions for these 3 things to align and to occur. All 3 components must occur simultaneously. They must use instructional materials that are relevant to the area of focus or the occupational cluster. And they must operate and function cooperatively using a single set of learning outcomes. So let me just give you a brief kind of like a visual of what these 3 components look like. Keep in mind that these are non-exhaustive. These are just for illustration purposes. Now you have the three components grouped together here. You have the adult education, you have the workforce training, and you have the workforce preparation. And it could be in any combination of a component within each of these groupings. So it could be under adult education, you have literacy skills, adult literacy skills, you got ESOL, you got ABE, you got ASE or GED prep programs. Some examples of workforce training are what we already refer to as CTE training programs or career technical education programs. They could be on-the-job training. They could be training sponsored by the employer or private sector sponsored training. They could be entrepreneurial training or skill upgrading or retaining. Examples of workforce preparation activities that are outlined in our curricular frameworks for all instructional programs are critical thinking, digital literacy, self-management skills, employability skills, and so on and so forth. Now, it could be any combination of these three groupings that you can do an IET on. So you can combine an adult ESOL program with a CTE program. Let's just say certified nursing assistant or home health aide. Within those pairing of the adult education and workforce training, the instruction must incorporate workforce preparation activity of equal intensity. You can incorporate digital literacy skills within the CNA field or the healthcare field. You can incorporate critical thinking skills and problem solving within the healthcare scenario, and so on and so forth. So that's just an example showing you how you can braid the three components of IET together. Now, there's different models for implementing an IET. There are 5 different models that are approved by the Department of Education. We have first, fully integrated instruction, partially integrated instruction, joint enrollment, one instructor model, and employer community partner model. In all of these implementation models, the following conditions have to be satisfied. They have to lead to student attainment of credentials of value. So there has to be a credential of value at the end. It could be a certification, it could be a diploma. Each instruction applied is applied with sufficient intensity and quality, meaning the adult education, or let's say the ESOL instruction, should occur with equal intensity and quality as the CNA program they're partnered in. They have to occur simultaneously, not necessarily at the same time, but within the same term or period of time. They must use occupationally relevant materials, meaning if I'm learning nouns, I might as well be learning nouns within the context of the nursing program or the certified nursing assistant program. Or if you want to go general, you can go nouns within the healthcare field. The components should function cooperatively and should operate within a single set of learning outcomes, which will we be covering towards the end of this presentation. And they have to offer a career pathway to a student. All right. So let's start with the stages where the groups or the participating teams within the technical assistance program has participated. So at first we started forming the IET team, the core IET team, and you might as well follow the same format or steps in formulating your own team within your own organization as you create new IET programs for your district or your college. So first, form your core IET team. Who is going to be the members of this team? You want to include members of the team that would be experts in the field of focus that you're focusing on. So if you're doing nursing assistant, home health aide, or construction, you must have at least the construction teacher, CNA teacher, or home health aide teacher as part of the team. Of course, you should not forget about your adult ed side. So you should have at least either your ESOL, ABE, or GED teacher also involved in the process. And you need to have somebody at the helm who's going to direct the activities of the team. Then you need to decide within the team, within the feedback of every member of the team, decide what occupational training you're going to focus on. How long is the program going to take? What program it is? Who are the students that are going to be involved in this process? And then last but not the least, in the forming stage, is the formation of the extended IET program. Because sometimes once you have decided on an IET program, you discovered along the way that you should bring additional members to your team, and now is the time to do that. Now, in order to select the best workforce training program that you wanted to perform an IET on, here are some of the questions that you need to be asking yourself. Are there jobs associated with the training? Because there's no use of developing an IET if there is no need or demand in the workforce for that particular field. You're going to have a very difficult time recruiting students. What occupational skills or courses are being targeted by the IET? So meaning, are they supposed to take any course in order to get that job? So in order to be a CNA, I have to have a certified nursing assistant training and pass the test for CNAs. Who will be the students for this IET program? Are they going to be your ESOL students? Are they going to be your ABE or GED students? You also need to decide at what point or at what level in these programs would you allow students to participate in the IET? Are there certifications associated with the training? Are there any tests? Are they employer recognized? Those are all very important because you need to think about them because they are the ones that are going to be eventually seeking for jobs within your community. And if the certifications and training that they receive are not industry recognized, then that's not going to help them get employed. Are there thresholds for skills and language requirements? So like I said earlier, you need to decide at what level. Are you going to start the IET program at level 3? Or are you going to only take students that are level 5 or above? Are there competencies required to successfully complete the course? Is there an exit grade level? Are they going to have to have at least a high school diploma at the end of the program? Are they going to need to be able to demonstrate certain skills? Are they going to have to go through a clinical program? Those are all very important because of the fact that you need to be planning for the resources and the alignment of these activities throughout the course of your IET program. Is there a third-party exam or licensure exam that students need to take at the end of the IET program? Who's going to pay for those licensure examinations? Would your students have the ability to pay for those? Or will you have to seek the help of a third party to help fund for those exams and licensures? And then, are your instructors going to have the opportunity to collaborate with each other? Because an IET program is a pairing of both your adult ed side and your career technical training side. Are they going to have the opportunity to at least periodically meet, or if not, plan together regularly? And how are you going to recruit the students for the program? Can that target population complete the course with enough basic skill support? So these are very important questions that will help you decide what occupational training you wanted to do with your IET program. One thing that I wanted to caution everyone is that you need to be consulting with your local regional partners who are also invested in the employment field. They are going to know what fields or what job clusters or what industry sectors have the highest need and are projected to grow over time. And that will just spell success in the employability of your students, and that will really ease up the recruitment for your IET programs. In selecting the best team, like I said, you must have your CTE side and your adult education side well represented. I know that there are some districts that may not have all of these lists. This is just a wish list for me. If you have to have only the key essential members of that team, they have to be at least have the CTE or workforce training instructor and the adult education instructor as the members of your team. You're going to have to make time so that the team can work together. Now, they're not going to be working all the time. So your teams you have to provide your team with an opportunity to work on their own and provide their contribution to the development of your IET program of study. So it's important that you create a virtual workspace where they can deposit or submit their contributions to the alignments and to the single set of learning objectives. Here are some of just the examples of some useful virtual workspaces where your teams can work together efficiently without having to be there all the time at the same time. So when you're doing the alignment of that, you start with your workforce training curriculum. You look at, let's say, your CNA training program, look at the curricular frameworks for CNA, and then look at your curricular frameworks for the adult education that you wanted to pair with your workforce training. So if you wanted to do GED, you must be looking at the GED curriculum frameworks, and you're going to now start aligning or matching the standards between the two. Where can they fit? Where can they work together? Where can they complement each other? After you've aligned those two, then you can fill in the appropriate workplace preparation activities. So to have an exhaustive list of these workplace preparation activities, I mentioned earlier that the workplace preparation activities are already included in your curricular frameworks for any program, instructional program for adult education. So here's an example that what I'm talking about. Start with a workforce training curriculum. And in this case, I'm showing you a building and construction technologies curriculum frameworks downloaded directly from the Florida Department of Education website. They already have the common career-ready practices, which would be a good wealth for you to pull your workforce preparation activities. And of course, these are the standards and benchmarks for each individual competency of building construction technologies. That's where those are the ones that you're going to need to align to your GED, ABE, or adult ESOL programs. There is the Department of Education has released a technical assistance for integrated education and training programs. And contained within that document is a template that I'm showing you right now. This template is what we call the single set of learning objectives template. Okay, so I just wanted to show you that the process that we did is we start filling out the first column, filling in all of the major standards under a particular workforce training program, for example, HHA or CNA. Then we started filling in the aligned standards for adult basic education or ESOL or GED, depending on which program you wanted to do. And then you're going to make sure that they kind of complement each other. You know what I'm saying? So for example, we're talking about particular workforce training content and objectives in CNA, like understanding the roles and responsibilities of the members of the healthcare team. So what basic skills in ABE can you include? Well, you have a lot in there. You can have some reading, reading of the different roles and responsibilities. You can have some writing in there as well, writing within context. You can also have mathematics in there. What are responsibilities of a healthcare professional that requires the application of basic mathematics skills? What types of things? Are they converting units? Are they making estimations and things like that? And that's going to help you determine which competencies and standards in your adult education curriculum will match the workforce training curriculum. And then the last stage in this part is really filling in the missing component, which is your workforce preparation activity that will complement, again, the aligned workforce training and basic skills standards and benchmarks. And again, I referred to this Florida's Integrated Education and Training Guide. The same guide that I mentioned earlier is technical assistance for implementing integrated education and training, downloadable directly from the Florida Department of Education. If you need the web link, I included it into the slides, so you can copy and paste that into your browser. So let me show you some of the examples here. I have one example here of the alignment that I was talking about, single set of learning outcomes. This one was developed by Osceola County Schools. Their area of focus is building and construction trades, or building construction technologies. So as you can see, I wanted to illustrate to you how you're going to align the standards for your CTE program with your adult ed program, and then plop in the workforce prep activity. So in the building construction technology program, they're learning how to select appropriate heavy equipment for a given task. They're also required to learn how to analyze construction components, the materials, the hardware, and their characteristics. So what reading, and this is being paired with adult ESOL. So what reading, listening, writing, speaking and listening, and language components would complement this. So on the reading part, they're going to be reading, understanding a safety manual. So they need to know how to read those manuals, or domain specific type of text. They need to understand different features of the text, because when you're reading a technical text, they're going to have a lot of graphs and charts. So there's just, so you want to put that into the reading component. On the listening, they need to learn how to actively listen, look at body language, and understand some hand signals, especially useful in the workplace, because you're not always able to communicate verbally, because in a construction site, there's a lot of noise. So you need to learn how to read hand signals. Speaking verbally, communicating and explaining specific step-by-step instructions. So that's another thing that we need to hammer on the basic skills. Can students repeat and explain step-by-step instructions? There might not be a writing component here that they identified, but there is a language component that they identified here as students must be able to learn about context-specific vocabulary in the context of building and construction, transition words to signal directions, descriptive adjectives to describe different things, and verbs of movement. They're going to be using a lot of verbs in this particular career field. Now, they also aligned it with some workforce prep activity. Here, they need to, one workforce prep activity that's very common in any field is workplace safety. Okay, so they indicated that effective communication, solving problems, perseverance, and having that growth mindset in the workplace would be super helpful in longevity. Now, after you've made the alignment between the three, now is for you to start gathering activities, resources, contextualized content to strengthen the alignment of your workforce training, workforce preparation activity, and adult education training. Gather the list of those resources, put them into the template that I showed you earlier, and then also develop or gather some existing assessment that will help measure or monitor the performance of your students against those aligned outcomes. So, and that's what I'm referring to as the next two columns into the template. So now what I want to do is I wanted to show you some draft examples of single set of learning outcomes that have been developed by 3 different districts. One is Palm Beach County Schools, the other is Miami-Dade College, and the other one is Osceola County Public Schools. Now, when you go into the webinar page of this webinar's page, you will only see 2 posted. So I'm going to try to share with you the last one from Palm Beach County towards the end, but I'm going to go ahead and just show you what they look like. So this is the one from Miami-Dade College, and I don't know if we have some people from Miami-Dade College that are here participating in this webinar. Let me know in the chat if you guys are here. I wanted to recognize all of you that have worked so hard to put this together. So there is a team that is composed of Luis Rodriguez, and also Jesus Renero, and also Karen Miller, that helped put together this single set of learning objectives for Miami-Dade. Miami-Dade College is doing an IET on logistics and transportation specialization. And as you can see here in the example that I'm showing you, and I'm going to go ahead and try to see if I can enlarge this a little bit more so you guys can see and read a little bit. All right, let me see if I can. Yeah, okay, I can do that. So in here, you can see that they have their workforce training components, and I can scroll down a little bit so you can see, okay, it comes multiple pages. So they start with the workforce training component, aligned it with the standards for GED because they're doing it with their GED preparation program. They put in the workforce prep activity, and then the 2 steps that I just mentioned earlier, they indicated the resources and activities and the required assessments, okay? So in this case, they are doing understanding of personal development and professional networking, and then exploring careers in supply chain management. So some of the resources and activities you're going to see here are examples of the jobs of related to chain management. You have transportation, storage, and distribution managers, supply chain managers, logistic analysts. So they should be able to read about those types of jobs and really examine and make determination, is this a real job for me? There are some videos here, some websites, some career exploration activities that we do have a lot of in the adult ed programs. There's lots of activities that you can see. There's some scenario activities to reinforce the workforce preparation activities, where students will have to react or play the role as if they're actually in the workplace. And then they also specified what assessments are they going to do to determine if students are understanding the standards of your IET program. So that's an example. I have another example here from Osceola County Schools. Very similar. They're doing, again, the one on building construction technologies. Same thing. They have all 3 components of the IET here. This section talks about resources and activities. There's lots of links to resources, videos, text that are contextualized within the field of building construction technologies. I also wanted to show you the last one is from Palm Beach County Schools. They're working on home health aid paired with ESOL El-Kate. And in this case, very similar. They have their workforce training standards, paired it with the basic skills content standards. workforce prep activity. They even went ahead and indicated what vocabularies they need to emphasize in each component. Very similar to the other school districts and colleges, they have links to handouts, links to worksheet, videos, and so on and so forth. They even have Kahoot quizzes as a formative assessment in terms of activities. So I am going to share with you the Palm Beach template later on before and while you're completing the evaluation for this training. But the Miami-Dade and the Osceola samples are available already for download from the webinar page. So let's talk about the next stage is that what are these activities and resources? So these are just some of the things that you can put into the activities and resources section of your single set learning template. You can do mini lesson, vocabulary, some role play activities. Especially if you're doing ESOL and a technical program, you want to practice lots of conversations in the workplace using appropriate terminology and or vocabulary, or understanding certain acronyms and what do they mean. Lots of videos, especially for students with low levels of literacy. Lots of reading articles because they eventually have to perform on the CASA's reading test, right? Or the tape, the tape test. In the math part, where there's going to be some computations, measurement activities, games. Make it fun, but at the same time, align it with the career technical program or career cluster that you're targeting. Here are some examples of some contextualized resources that are readily available, that you can download online, that they are going to be using or your students may be using in these IET programs. So the gathering of resources, as you can see in this, as you saw in the samples I gave you, are links to these resources so that the teacher and the students can access these sample activities or worksheets or resources that they can use to learn both the basic skills in their adult ed side and the technical skills that they're co-enrolled in. Here's another example, diving in again. I already showed you this earlier, but this time it's a little bit bigger. This one is from Palm Beach County. Again, very similar to the previous example from Osceola. They're working on home health aid, workforce training objectives to the far left, followed by the basic skills and workforce prep activity. I wanted to point out that there are multiple types of assessment that I identified. It doesn't have to always be paper-based test. And then the last stage is really the adjourning stage. That's when you formulate your single set of learning outcomes. And as you develop those single set of learning outcomes, you'll realize that some alignments have to be revised or modified. And then maybe adding in more activities and assessments based on those competencies and the single set of learning outcomes. And then really and truly, once you're done, you just need to kind of review and format and proofread your work to make sure that everybody, and it can be fully disseminated and implemented throughout your organization. So let's talk about this last part, which is called the single set of learning outcomes, which is going to drive really the implementation of the entire program of study of your IET. So what is a single set of learning outcome? Well, single set of learning outcomes are statements that summarize what students need to be able to demonstrate by the end of the lesson or the lesson unit or the weekly unit, okay? And how these three components of IET are going to function or work together within that lesson or unit. So I'm going to give you some examples here of single set of how to develop your own single set of learning outcomes.
let's take, for example, the Miami-Dade example, or Miami-Dade College example here. Let's look at this one and see, okay, let's say we align these career technical standards, plan product service management strategies, explain the role of technology in order processing, tracking, and customer research, explain basic management concepts, and apply sound decision-making strategies. Sounds pretty general in some of these, right? And then we itemize, okay, what basic skills in math, science, social studies, and language arts are going to be reinforced or are going to complement and align with these CTE standards. So in math, they're looking at abstracting problems, interpreting data displays. In social studies, they're looking at integration of content presented in various ways, and also reading charts and graphs, which is very much in line with your math. On the science, they need to be able to evaluate conclusions with evidence. And then in the language arts, they need to be able to analyze how two or more texts address similar themes or topics. And then you're going to incorporate at the same time the workforce prep activity there and the critical thinking skills that's needed. So communicating clearly and then using information. Here are some of the examples that they show here as some resources and activities. They have a website on the beauty of data visualization. There's a video on the crash course, a YouTube video on a crash course on how to navigate digital information, a mini lesson on organizing data or understanding, analyzing data. That refers to particular product service management, such as USPS, UPS, FedEx, or DHL. So students are reading different charts and graphs within those occupations or companies. Then they also need to look at some vision statements and analyze some vision statements of different companies. Another activity here are looking at the vision statement and how their vision statement works as a piece of a data and informs their narrative, that informs the narrative of the company. And then discuss how vision statement bridges decision makers to the actions of a business, especially informing their strategy for positive results or solving certain problems within the company. And then, of course, you have the assessments here, though. So now we're looking at this whole thing. How can we develop a single set of learning outcome for this particular unit of learning? Well, here's an example of how you can phrase this. In here, I forgot to mention that you can develop more than one statement to really summarize, because some of these components cannot really fully be combined or summarized together. So in my case, I developed two statements to comprise the single set of learning outcome for this particular learning unit. Students will create or use data analytics to elaborate on a company's vision statement and describe the products or service management. Students will explain orally or summarize in writing how companies use their vision statement to inform strategy or solve problems. So really creating a sentence or two, combining all of these little components that's in play. The three components again in play are your workforce training or your CTE training, your basic skills or your adult education program, and your workforce prep activity. So now let's analyze this statement and see, okay, where do I see all of those three components in the two statements that I just showed you? Well, I'm going to go ahead and use colors and say, okay, look at this. The red section of this, the red font of the statement refers to the workforce training component. The yellow font is referring to the adult education skills. And the green font is referring to your workforce preparation activity component. So as you can see in both sentences, I have all three components playing together and interacting with each other, okay? So The create and use of data analytics or analyzing charts and graphs is a basic skill that students need to learn. We teach that in ESOL, ABE, and GED. The explanation or oral explanation or summarization or main idea or paraphrasing are all part of our adult education standards, may it be ESOL, ABE, or GED. And then as you can see, the product service management, the strategy in solving problems, those are all comprised in the workforce part. Those are the ones that are being emphasized by the CTE program. And then the green component, again, like I said, are the ones that will help them land a job. One is really understanding a company's vision statement. Well, actually for both, it really has something to do with understanding a company's vision statement. Here's another example of another single set of learning outcomes. This one is from Palm Beach County. As you can see here, they're doing an activity. What students are learning in the CTE side is demonstrating knowledge of bloodborne diseases, including HIV and AIDS. And then they specified all of the key vocabulary words here that they're going to need to learn. And then on the basic skills side, they have 2 reading standards that they're reinforcing: reading closely to determine what the text says explicitly and making logical inferences. Determine the central idea is another one on the reading. For writing, they're writing some arguments. For speaking and listening, they are participating in a range of conversation and presenting information or findings. Under workforce prep, they wanted to pair and incorporate critical thinking, understanding systems, using information, and self-management. And here are some activities and resources that they included in their SSLO, or single set of learning outcomes. Some anticipation guides, ask questions about different diseases. What do they believe? What are some, maybe identify some misconceptions that students have. One thing could be COVID. You can talk about that. Create and discuss these situations about how a patient presents their symptoms to an emergency health unit or healthcare provider. So maybe let's act it out. Let's act it out. When you come in, one student will play the healthcare provider and another student will play the patient. And how is that interaction look like in the emergency room? Graphic organizers is another activity that I identified here. Web cluster map to allow the students to kind of make association between community resources and services that address various prevention strategies for bloodborne diseases. They even have an activity to create a trifold brochure. Students will develop the trifold brochure, and they even incorporated some critical thinking here using a Venn diagram to compare which behaviors are risky versus healthy behaviors. And the goal is for students to really understand what behaviors are positive towards promoting, are impacting the spread of disease. All right, so if we are going to develop a single set of learning outcomes on how all of these columns, kind of play out. Well, there is one statement that I created here to summarize everything together. Or students will spread awareness of bloodborne diseases and available community resources by developing information materials and conducting an outreach to a small community. So this kind of summarizes or encapsulates the entire screen that you're looking at right now. And let's identify those 3 components that I'm talking about. You got your workforce training in red, adult basic education skills in yellow, and your workforce preparation activity in green. Again, like I said, these are all playing out together, that your basic skills are being propelled and used to support your workforce training within the context of the workforce. All right, so I'm going to pause right here and see if we have Any questions? So feel free to type in your questions on using the Q&A tab. And then I'll pause again later on to see if any one of you have any questions. So just to summarize everything together is like the purpose of that single set of learning outcomes. Why is it so important? Is it allows the instructors to really focus on the aligned expectation in the classroom. What does this IET class look like? How am I going to organize the resources as they are aligned? And then I wanted to see how the three components function together. And then and it just adds a little bit more clarity. If the teacher wants to add additional resources and activities, they can do so because the alignment is clarified. So let's take a jab at this and see if we can come up with, we come up with an alignment here, just very generally. So let's start with some hairdresser, hairstylist, and cosmetologist. Okay, so let's give it a try using the chat feature of your Zoom screen. I want you to type in, first read the what they're learning on the workforce side. Okay, and then the next thing is like I want you to type into the chat, what do you think are the basic skills that's needed here? Things that you already are teaching in your class that would complement these workforce training objectives. And then later on, we're going to talk about what workforce prep activity do you think would be sufficient. So if students are learning to become hairdressers, hairstylists, and cosmetologists, they need to learn how to prepare the client for service. The client client doesn't show up and you immediately sit them at the chair, right? Students will have to have the basic communication skills, language skills to check with the customer, what do they need? How is their day going? What is the purpose of their visit? How you can better serve the client? Are there any special needs or specifications that the client require in their particular type of service? Students must be able to analyze and evaluate the hair's chemical composition and structure. So, just by inspection, touching it, looking at the type of hair without having to go in chemically and breaking it down into atoms, students must be able to know what's the chemical composition of that hair, for whether it's blonde, dark black hair, brunette, curly hair, treated hair. Those types of things the students need to know so that they can best identify what procedure or the course of action for the service that they're going to provide. And last but not the least, in this particular learning unit, students must be able to identify different compositions of shampoos and utilize problem-solving skills to determine the appropriate products and applications, and really communicate that understanding to the client. Okay, so in this particular case, what basic skills and content and objectives you think would match these three components that I just mentioned in the workforce training? Can you please, you can recommend some? All right, so somebody mentioned measurement skills and basic math. Yes, if you're analyzing the hair structure, you need to know how to measure. You need to know estimation. You don't always have to have a ruler. Just looking at the student, the client's hair, can you estimate the length of the hair? In language, you should be able to describe the client's hair, based on specific adjectives that are appropriate to describe that client's hair. So there's many things that you can do. Here's another example. Of course, vocabulary is important. They need to know the vocabulary, because in order for them to understand the different types of shampoos and compositions of shampoos, they need to first understand the vocabulary words on the different compositions of shampoos, the different types of hair, the different words, transition words, or conversational terms, basic small talk term that you can use to prepare the client for service. Yep, public communication, critical thinking. Yes, we need to be able to analyze. The analysis part really reinforces the critical thinking skills here. Safety, oh my god, that is so important. Somebody mentioned safety, and that is super important because that will determine how much shampoo you can apply. What types of are you going to put a protective shield to the client? Are you going to put what other things that you need to do to make sure prior to executing the service that you make sure to ensure that the client will be safe throughout that. So thank you for all of that feedback that you're saying. Oh, and hygiene as well. That's so important. Thank you for bringing that up. All right, so let's see here what basic skills contents I kind of identified here. Some of these you already have mentioned: measurement, conversion of units, because different products have different uses, different units. If you get products from Europe or Asia, they're going to be in metric measurements. And then products here in the United States will be in customary units. Need to know how to do proportions and problem solving. The problem solving process in math in itself is a basic skill that can complement this workforce training. Like problem solving, as I said, understanding what situation you're in, what type of hair, what's the problem that the client is dealing with. Is the client's hair scalp very sensitive? That does not permit you to use certain products. How much of that product will we use? Now, for language art, of course, you're going to need to be able to read the labels of the different shampoos, read text describing various types of hair compositions, understanding that main idea, providing supporting details, because you have to explain to your client why you're applying this much or this less of a product, or why you selected this product for their hair. And then descriptive writing and writing problem solution, again, are two types of writing methods that's best going to be used in this field. Because if something happens to the hair of the client that they're not very happy, you may have to document that. Or if a client, let's say, files a complaint on your website, how are you going to respond to that client? So really writing the descriptive writing, describing really what's happening there, that's super important. And again, my examples are non-exhaustive. These are just examples. Sky is the limit on content that you already teach that will align to this. So give us some more examples that you think would apply here. One example here in the chat, I saw: review the types of hairstyle would best match the client needs. Maybe if you have a lower level group of students, maybe I'll have different types of shampoos on one column, and I'll have different hairstyles in one column, and then they need to match what types of, which shampoo would work best with what type of hair composition. Thank you for sharing that. Oh my God, this one is super important: listening. Especially if you're pairing this program with an ESOL class or an LCATE class. Listening skills is not just a basic skill, but it's also a workforce preparation activity because it's part of that clear communication process. All right, so we are now going to go in and kind of show you my last example here. These are what I identified as the last things here. Students will apply skills in measurement, ratios, and proportion to evaluate hair and summarize information to prepare client for service. And then another one is students will apply problem-solving skills to meet client needs for focusing on clearly communicating factors that influence the choice of shampoo products. So really, two statements that just summarizes everything and puts everything together and put everything in perspective so that the teacher understands what is the bottom line of instruction. So these are just the steps that we went through throughout this webinar, I just wanted to give you a one quick glimpse of all of the steps that we went through in formulating the integrated education and training program of study. And really emphasizing that the concept is simple, but it requires a little bit more work. And you need to really show the full scope of your IET program by identifying those activities and resources and assessment. If you do this the right way, you will have unlimited potential to re-engage students and strengthen your partnerships with employers and your workforce partners and re-energize your program. So here's my last message to everyone. You alone can do it, but you can't do it alone. So you need to really partner with your CTE because you are not a CTE expert. You're an adult educator. So, you know, having that partner CTE teacher to soundboard and check in, you know, ideas with would really help in spurring and supporting your IET programs. At this point, we would like to know what you think. There is going to be a survey that's going to pop up on your screen. What I'd like for you to do is to please answer these few questions. We'd like to know what you think. And while you're doing that, I am going to put into the chat the third one that has not been posted. Yep, the third single set of learning outcomes that has not been posted on the webinar page, which is the one from Palm Beach County. You guys can go into the chat and click on to the PDF icon from the chat to save a copy of that draft. We will be posting this later on into the into a central page on the IPDAY website. So if you're not able to download it at this time, don't be afraid. That's going to be fine. You'll have an opportunity to do that later on. I just wanted to remind you that next Wednesday, we will have our end of the year wrap-up webinar. So please do not miss that. We will talk about all of the things that are upcoming in the new year for IPDAY. So I will see you then, and thank you for tuning in for today's webinar.